Welcome to Connected Calendars. This is part 2 in a 3-part series. In this part, we're going to look at adding Android. My name is Chris Barsis. I'm Principal Consultant at Personal Mac Geniuses, and I'll be your host for this video. Before we begin, there are a few things I'd like to point out. What I'm going to demonstrate works best for a small group, like a family or a small office. Since every group or business is different, please contact an Apple support specialist in your area for an evaluation of your needs. If you've watched since part 1, you'll remember Bob and Bill started a company together. They hired Pam to handle the phones and scheduling. They added iCloud and created accounts so that each of them can sync calendars and contact information back and forth between them. Since then, sales are growing, and Bob and Bill decided they need to add a new salesperson. After a long search, they found Skippy. Skippy is not exactly what you'd call a dapper dresser. Besides his questionable fashion sense, he also swears that he's more productive on an Android device. Normally, Bill and Bob wouldn't allow an Android device to pollute their company, but Skippy is a sales god and has raised revenue by 300% at his last employer. So they hire Skippy on. Of course, the problem is, now Skippy can't talk to iCloud because he's on an Android-based system. The way to handle this situation is to get Google Calendars into the mix. Skippy is going to create a Google Calendar called Skippy's Work Schedule. Pam is also going to subscribe to the same calendar. This will allow both Pam and Skippy to book appointments for him. Even though iCloud and Google Calendars solve similar problems, they don't work the same, and there are some advantages and disadvantages to using either. Let's take a look at how to add a Google Calendar. If you've been with us from the beginning here in part 1, you'll recognize this as our demo version of Pam's desktop. And what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to get ourselves into Google, get ourselves a Google account, and then get that account set up on the Macintosh. And the simplest way to do that is just to pop open a web browser, type in google.com, and head straight there. Oh, hey, looks like it must have been either Douglas Adams' birthday or maybe something to do with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Very cool. Anyhow, you'll see that there are a bunch of different places here at the top of Google. And calendar is the one we're most concerned about. So we're going to click on calendar. And that's going to ask us to sign in and so on and so forth. But we don't actually have an account yet. So we're going to have to go up there to the top and hit sign up. And when we do this, we're going to be given a screen with all sorts of information that we're going to have to fill out. Now, because we have already got we did the iCloud already, we're going to do the same basic thing in here. We're going to use the address pam@icloud.com. That way it keeps it all together. And we're also going to use the same password we used with iCloud, which is junkfood 123 and junkfood 123. And we're going to get rid of this. Now, why we did this is because at this point, it makes it very simple. All the calendar information will all use the same username and password. And that makes everybody simple and easy, especially for like IT. And you see Pam Preston, United States. And once again, we're using the bogus birth date for 1990, which of course is April Fool's. And unlike iCloud, they make you go through this horrible little CAPTCHA thing. And you have to sit here and kind of look at it and go, okay, what in the world is that? I think that's something, and I don't know what the other thing is. And you start punching these things in. Eventually, you get it. And once that's done, you go ahead and you hit the button, and you're given this area and accounts. It notes that it says it's going to send to pmgpam@icloud.com the confirmation, verification email. So we're going to pop back into our email, and bing, there it is already. And there's a simple little link in the email right here that you click, and that then verifies that you are who you say you are. And now it's going to ask you to do a whole bunch of things like add an email to or add your mobile number. I don't want to bother with that. It's a demo, not worth the effort. It's also going to ask you a bunch of other things like, hi, look, we're here in the calendar. And you click on these things and it's going to say, okay, are you really in the United States? Is it really Pacific time? And of course, you change that to whatever time zone you're in. And then it asks you things like, do you want to be reminded about events and so on and so forth? You can automatically set these up here. You can also change them once you get going. So we're just going to dump it and leave it as it is. And no, we don't want to fiddle around with the iPhone and the Android and other stuff like that. No reason to at this point because we're setting up the Mac to connect to Google Calendars, not the iPhone and the iPad. So here it is. It's pretty much a blank calendar, pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to be. And at this point, we've got to get ourselves a new calendar for Skippy's work. Do that by going over here to the calendars, clicking on this little widget, and then it says create new calendar. And inside the new calendar area, you're going to be able to give it a title. Obviously, this is very much exactly like what we did with Bob, so we're going to call it Skippy's Work. We can give it a description, a location, specify if it's in the U.S. and what time zone and all that good stuff like that. There is something in here as well to be aware of as we move down the page. See how it says share with specific people? That is very much like iCloud's way of sharing the calendars with other people. So you can put in here, for example, maybe let's say Bob wants to keep track of what Skippy's doing. You can put in Bob at iCloud or pmgbob at iCloud.com in this email address here. And then you'd be able to come on over to this side and set up some default settings for him as to what he has privileges is. So for example, let's say it's Bob. Bob may only want to see whether or not Skippy's free or busy. He doesn't necessarily care about who Skippy is going to go see. He just wants to make sure Skippy's actually doing some work. So he might select that option. And you can do this, up and down, fiddle with these things. There's a bunch of permissions here. There's 4 of them to be precise. And they give you different levels of control over this calendar. And also don't forget that you can also make calendars for things like conference rooms, wherein you could say free or busy in the conference room and people would know whether or not that conference room was available. Or maybe even assets, like for example, if you have a piece of testing gear, somebody may have it out. You can just book it out through the calendar so you would know. Anyway, in this case, we're just going to continue and create the calendar. And now we're going to hook this calendar. Well, there we go. There's Skippy's calendar. Okay. We're going to hook Skippy's calendar up to Pam's iMac. And we're going to do that by getting rid of the Safari and getting rid of Mail. And we're going to pull back up our calendar app. Oh, no, sorry, excuse me. We're going to pull up our system preferences. And inside system preferences, you'll see Mail, Contacts, and Calendars. Ta-da! Obviously, I'm using 10.8 for this particular demo. And when you click on that, you have a whole bunch of options. Note that none of them say Google Calendar. That's okay because it's actually part of Gmail. So we're going to click Gmail, and we're going to give it a name. So in this case, we're going to call this PMG Pam. Helps if I don't use my fat fingers here. Pam, there we go. And of course, we now have to give it the email address that we used for the Google Calendar, which is pmgpam at iCloud.com. And of course, by doing it this way, and of course, same thing with the password, it makes it very easy to remember. All the calendars are always pmgpam at iCloud.com. All right, now Google is saying that it can give you a bunch of things that it can synchronize. For example, mail, messages, and notes we don't actually care about, so we're going to turn them off because we didn't actually set those up in Google. We only care about the contacts and the reminders, or calendars and reminders. Now that that's been set up, we can go ahead and close the system preferences. And when we come back into the Calendars app, bingo, there is the Google calendars for pmgpam at iCloud.com. Now, obviously, we don't care about these two. We only care about Skippy. So there's Skippy's calendar, and you'll see at this point, once we start using it, it works almost identical to the way iCal works, or I should say iCloud. So we'll say that, for example, somebody calls up on the phone and it's Jim. And Pam's trying desperately, and sometimes you have to go do it this way. There we go. Okay. New event. No big deal. Let's say that it's Jim that's called up. And so Jim wants an appointment. So Pam types in appointment with Jim. And Jim wants his appointment at, I don't know, let's say 11 o'clock in the morning, and he wants to have it end at like 1-ish or something. And of course, just like before in iCloud, the whole point behind this and the thing that makes this work is to pull down and make sure that you're putting this information into the right calendar, which of course in this case is Skippy's work. And just like we did with iCloud, you can add times in and alerts and messages and so on and so forth. And now that we've done that, we're going to have to go up here and hit refresh calendars, which is up in view. No, sorry. Yeah, view. We're doing this because the information needs to get sent up to google.com. And the way Google and iCloud work is slightly different, as I mentioned before. With Google, it is on a timed refresh cycle. So for example, you will be able to set up in calendars, and I'll show you where this is later, a way to say to Google, okay, I want your information every 1 minute, every 5 minutes, every 20 minutes, every hour or so, like this. Whereas with iCloud, it's a push mechanism. As soon as you put it into your calendar, it's immediately pushed up to iCloud, and then it's pushed down to the iOS devices. The difference, of course, being that you could change things 5 times in a minute, and only at the end of that minute are those 5 items going to be sent up to Google. And then it may take another minute for your Google devices or your iOS devices that are using the Google Calendar to actually go back out there and pull it down. So it's not an instantaneous thing like the way it is with the iCloud. Anyway, let's go and see how to set this up on a tablet. Here we are back on my iPad. I don't have an Android device, so I can't show you how to do this on an Android device. But it's going to be a very similar sort of setup. We're going to, in this case, set it up as if we were Bob and wanted to look at or modify Skippy's calendar. So we're going to go ahead and click on settings, just like we did before. And once again, we're back to mail, contacts, and calendars. And we tap the add at the bottom. And notice, once again, we're presented with Gmail. So we pop up Gmail. Now remember, this is almost exactly the same as you do it on the Mac side. So as you move along, you're going to notice a lot of similarities. In this case, we're going to pretend that we're Skippy on an iPad, even though Skippy doesn't use iPads. And what the heck, we'll just call him Skippy Butters at this point for giggles. And he's got his, we've got a Gmail account set up. And that is going to be pmgpam@icloud.com. Okay, and of course we're doing that because we want to subscribe to the Skippy calendar that Pam created for us. Now, of course, we could have set this up so that Skippy could have had his own Gmail account. We're just doing this for demonstration purposes so you can see how it works. And we're going to change the description. So we're not going to go through the extra step of setting up Skippy an individual account and then subscribing to Pam's. We're just going to go straight into Pam's. Considering Pam's, of course, is a business, and he's the only one using it anyway. It's going to say something like this: can I get Gmail? Which is perfectly fine because we never set up Gmail. We set it up for the calendar. So you just go ahead and say, okay. You tap next, and it says, holy cow, are you really, really sure that you want to do this? Because it's not really completely, and you go, yeah, fine, don't worry about it. Obviously, we turn off mail because we never set up mail. And we're not really concerned about notes either. It's really only calendars that are the important thing here. I'm going to tap our next. It's going to add the account. And it's going to think about that. And then there it is right at the bottom, Skippy's calendar. So obviously we bounce back out to home. We come back into our calendar app and we press on calendars at the top. And now when we look along, there we have Skippy's calendar. And of course, just like before, we're going to turn off those extra calendars. And boom, there it is. Very simple. You can see it's not a horrendously difficult thing to do. Now, like I said, this is being done on an iPad, not on an Android tablet. I imagine that the Android tablet would be very, very similar, considering it's from Google, and Google, of course, wants you to use their calendars and their things. And just like before, this is a two-way street. So we can make modifications here that will be displayed elsewhere. For example, let's say we look at this and go, ooh, I'm going to have to reschedule this. We click on this, we change the time, we say okay, we say done, bang, the time gets changed here, and that information will get pushed up to Google on its next refresh. As you can see, we're back on Pam's machine, and notice how the refresh has not happened yet. So we're going to have to go through here and force it to do the refresh. And we're going to do it just the same way as we did last time. We're going to pop up to the top here, and we're going to hit View, Refresh Calendars. And in a moment, you can see it says Updating up there at the top. Boom. Okay. Skippy's change is now in our calendar. Now, this is kind of annoying, and we don't want to do this manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to bounce into Preferences and Accounts, and we're going to click on Gmail, and as you can see, there is a pull down that will allow us to change this to whatever we need it to be. Every minute is probably the most reasonable if you're going to have a fairly active calendar. Obviously, there's a big difference between how Google Calendar and iCalendar works. The iCloud works off of a push mechanism, so as soon as you change the calendar information, it pushes it up to iCloud, and then iCloud pushes it down to the iOS devices. Whereas with Google, the information is only done on this cycle. So it is very possible that you could have a period of time where you're both out of sync with each other and could potentially overlap, and then you'll have to deal with issues. Anyhow, that's the end of part 2, Connected Calendars. I hope you've enjoyed it and that you got a lot of use out of it here. I'd like to say thank you for joining me as well, and give you a quick little heads up. There is a part 3. Part 3 is how to connect a Google Calendar to an iPad, a Mac, and a WordPress website so that you would be able to make changes on either the iPad or the Mac and have them show up on the website with no coding on your part and no real administration either. That's part 3. I hope you'll join me. Thank you very much.